They all turned away from me, called me broken, useless, forgotten. But when his storm-grey eyes found mine, the world itself shattered. I didn't know it then, but the Alpha King wasn't just looking at me. He was waiting for me. My name is Elara Frostweaver, though almost no one dared call me that. To the pack, I was only Ara, the scentless one, the broken one, the forgotten shadow at the edge of every gathering. They said an Omega without scent was no Omega at all, too plain to draw notice, too weak to fight, too invisible to be wanted. I grew up hearing those words more than my own name. They clung to me like frost, chilling every corner of my soul. I learned to keep my head down, to move quietly, to let the world pass me by. Every day blurred into the next. My hands blistered from fetching water before the sun rose. My back ached from scrubbing the stone halls until they gleamed. And through it all, I endured the whispers. She'll never be chosen. She doesn't even belong here. Better if she had never been born. Sometimes they didn't even bother to whisper. Sometimes the cruelty was sharp and loud, a dagger thrown in broad daylight. I smiled through it, but inside, each word carved deeper into me. And yet, I dreamed. Quiet dreams I never dared speak aloud. Dreams of someone, anyone, looking at me and seeing more than my weakness. Dreams of belonging. Dreams of mattering. Just once, I wanted to be seen. Just once, I wanted to feel as though I wasn't a mistake written into the pack's story. The moon rose higher that night, and the pack stirred with restless excitement. The grand mating ceremony had come. For weeks, preparations had buzzed through the air, filling even the coldest corners with expectation. Lanterns were strung through the ancient trees, their golden light swaying like fireflies in the shadows. The sharp scent of pine mingled with roasting meat, spices drifting from the feast laid out to impress visiting wolves. Music floated across the clearing, wild and pulsing like a heartbeat, urging the night forward. Every Omega polished their hair, straightened their gowns, painted hope into their eyes. Each of them prayed that tonight would change their fate, that a mate would claim them, lift them into a life of honor, security, love. Their laughter spilled around me, bright and eager, while I stood apart. I didn't share their excitement, not because I didn't want what they wanted, but because I knew better. No alpha would ever lower his gaze to the scentless girl. No warrior would ever pause long enough to ask my name. No one would risk shame for choosing me. So I prayed differently. Not to be noticed, not to be claimed, not to be humiliated before the crowd. I prayed only to be spared the mockery. I prayed that the shadows would hide me well enough to survive the night. As the drums beat louder, my chest tightened. The clearing glowed with firelight and promise, but all I saw were the eyes that would judge me. All I heard were the voices that would whisper about me. All I felt was the familiar weight of invisibility pressing down on my shoulders. I smoothed my worn dress with trembling hands, wishing it could transform me into someone else. Someone braver. Someone worthy. But the reflection in the water trough earlier had already reminded me who I was. A girl with hollow eyes, lips pressed tight against years of silence. The air buzzed with the thrill of possibility. Young Omegas swayed to the rhythm, hearts pounding as if destiny itself waited just beyond the fire. I lingered at the edge, where the shadows stretched long and safe. A place where no one would look twice. For a moment, I closed my eyes. I imagined a world where the whispers didn't follow me, where I wasn't Ara the Scentless, but Elara Frostweaver, the name my grandmother had given me, heavy with history, full of strength I couldn't yet see. But reality pulled me back with a cruel laugh drifting from the crowd. I forced myself to breathe, to steady my hands. Remind myself, survival, not glory. That was all I needed from this night. The ceremony had begun, and I, small, silent, invisible, prepared to fade into the shadows once more. But the whispers that night weren't about me. They rippled through the crowd like restless wind, stirring hearts, feeding fears, sparking awe. They were about him, the Alpha King, Kale Stormcrest. A name spoken like both prayer and curse. A man cloaked in legend, wrapped in stories too dark to ignore, too dangerous to fully believe. Some said he was more storm than flesh. Some swore his blood carried winter itself, that he was born beneath a cursed moon, destined to bring frost wherever he walked. His power, they claimed, could shake the very mountains. His presence alone could make even the fiercest warrior tremble, freeze the marrow in their bones. And still, every voice whispered of him with reverence, as though to say his name too loudly might summon the storm to their doorstep. I had never seen him. I had never thought I would. Kings did not walk among the broken, the forgotten. And yet, that night, the impossible happened. I felt it before I saw him, a shift in the air, sharp and heavy, like the moment before thunder cracks. The weight of a gaze. It pressed against me, thick as snowfall, piercing through the veil of shadows I clung to. My heart stuttered. My breath caught in my throat. Every instinct screamed at me to keep my head down, to remain unseen, as I had always done. But some force stronger than fear compelled me. Slowly, trembling, I lifted my eyes. And there he was, the Alpha King, Kale Stormcrest, watching me. Not the crowd, not the dazzling Omegas preened and polished for his attention. Not the rivals who angled themselves closer to the centre of the firelight. Me. His storm-grey eyes locked with mine. The world seemed to still in that moment. The laughter, the music, the scrape of feet against frozen earth, all of it dimmed. All I knew was the weight of that gaze. Unyielding, unrelenting, unbelievable. His presence was nothing like I imagined. It wasn't loud, though he commanded every inch of the clearing. It wasn't cruel, though power radiated from him in waves that dared anyone to stand against him. It was vast, like staring into the heart of a storm, knowing it could either destroy you or deliver you. The firelight flickered across his features, carving shadows along the sharp line of his jaw, catching on the silver threads woven into the dark cloak draped over his shoulders. The stories hadn't lied. He looked like a man born of winter itself. Cold beauty, unforgiving strength, eyes the colour of storm clouds rolling in, promising ruin. And yet, when they met mine, something inside me shifted. A spark, a tremor, I couldn't explain. It wasn't just that he saw me, it was that he didn't look away. I should have. I should have dropped my gaze, bowed my head, obeyed the unspoken rule that Omegas like me were meant to vanish into silence. But I couldn't. Some invisible tether held me still, pulled tight between his storm and my shadow. The whispers grew louder. I could hear them, sharp as claws, snapping at the edge of my awareness. He's here. Look, King Kale. Don't stare too long or he'll steal your breath. But they weren't talking about me anymore, and for once, that didn't matter. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just the shadow. I was the subject of his eyes. The realization terrified me. My palms were damp, my knees weak, my throat dry. I felt as though I stood naked in the open, every flaw of my existence exposed to a man who could unmake me with a single word. And yet, I couldn't look away. He didn't blink. He didn't shift. He simply watched, as if trying to unravel the secrets I didn't even know I carried. I wondered if I was imagining it, if exhaustion and longing had created a phantom in the firelight, if my heart had woven a cruel dream just to remind me of what I would never have. But the weight of his gaze was too real. The storm was too close, and for the first time, the shadows I had clung to my entire life didn't feel like enough to hide me. My chest rose and fell, in shallow, uneven breaths. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. A glance, a passing flicker of attention that meant less than smoke in the wind. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't the glance of a king idly surveying the crowd. This wasn't curiosity or accident. This was something else, something that reached for me through the din of music and laughter, through the sneers of rivals and the silence of my own loneliness. It was a storm breaking against the walls I had built, and I didn't know whether to run from it or let it sweep me away. My lips parted, but no sound came. What could I possibly say, if words were even allowed? What could a forgotten Omega offer to a man born of power and curse? I should have stepped back. I should have let the crowd swallow me whole. But I didn't. I stood there, rooted to the earth, trembling beneath the force of his attention. The night spun on around us, but I felt caught in the stillness of his eyes. Each second stretched, heavy and fragile, until it felt like the world might shatter under its weight. And maybe, just maybe, a part of me wanted it to. Of course, it didn't last. The fragile stillness that had wrapped around me shattered like thin glass. Laughter sliced through the air, sharp and cruel, cutting deeper than any blade. Celine, the baiter's daughter, swept past me with her chin tilted high, her gown glittering in the firelight as though even the stars bent to her will. "Careful, shadow girl," she sneered, her voice dripping with mockery. "Don't get in anyone's way tonight." The words struck with practiced precision. I flinched, though I tried not to. Heat flooded my face, crawling up my neck until my skin burned with shame. Around us a ripple of laughter followed, cruel and eager, wolves always ready to sharpen their teeth on the weakest among them. My fingers curled into trembling fists at my sides. I told myself to ignore it, to swallow the sting, to disappear into the shadows like I always had. But the sound of their laughter clung to me, heavy, relentless, echoing in my head until all I wanted was for the earth to open and swallow me whole. Please, let me disappear. Please let their eyes slide past me, let their voices forget me. I had begged for invisibility my whole life, but in moments like this, it never felt like enough. Celine's perfume, sweet and suffocating, lingered in the air as she walked away, already surrounded by admirers who fed on her confidence, her beauty, her certainty that the world would always bend in her favour. I lowered my gaze, staring at the frozen ground, wishing I could shrink until I no longer existed. The whispers returned, louder this time, bold in the safety of numbers. Pathetic. Why did they even let her come? She should have stayed hidden. Each word pierced, lodging in my chest like shards of ice. My breath came shallow, my heartbeat wild, every nerve in my body screaming with humiliation. But then, something pulled me to lift my head. A thread, invisible but unbreakable, tugged at me until my eyes rose from the dirt. Kael, the Alpha King, still watching, not with disdain, not with pity, not with the cruel amusement I had come to expect from anyone who dared to notice me. His gaze was steady, silent, unshaken, and in that silence there was power. I couldn't explain it, but his stillness wrapped around me like a shield. He didn't need to speak. He didn't need to scold Celine or silence the laughter. His eyes alone carried the weight of defiance. In them, I saw no mockery, no dismissal, only recognition. As if he saw through the shame, through the cracks, through every broken piece of me I had tried so hard to hide. It rattled me more than Celine's cruelty ever could, because cruelty was familiar. But this was something I had never known. The laughter around me began to fade, though no one had stopped. It dulled beneath the pounding of my pulse, the rush of blood in my ears, the storm building in my chest. I no longer heard their words. All I felt was the weight of his silence, heavy and unyielding, anchoring me in place. For a heartbeat, I forgot Celine existed. I forgot the crowd. I forgot my shame. It was only him. Kael Stormcrest, the Alpha King, eyes locked on mine as though nothing else mattered. And that silence, that terrible, beautiful silence, spoke louder than any cruel word ever could. It told me I was not invisible. It told me I was not forgotten. It told me in ways I couldn't yet understand that I was seen. The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced across his face. He stood tall, immovable, a storm contained in human form. And still, he didn't look away. My hands trembled, not from fear this time, but from the terrifying realization that something inside me was changing. The shame, the humiliation, the urge to disappear. It was still there, but beneath it pulsed a flicker of something I had never felt before. Hope. I swallowed hard, my throat tight, my chest aching as though it couldn't hold the weight of this fragile, impossible moment. The world had always told me I was nothing. But Kael's silence whispered that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. I dropped my gaze at last, unable to bear the intensity any longer. My lungs dragged in a shaky breath, my heart stumbling in its rhythm. But even as I looked away, I could still feel it. The storm of his attention lingered, etched into my skin, branded onto my soul. And though Celine's laughter still echoed in the air, though whispers still crawled at the edges of the gathering, I knew something had shifted. Not in them, not in the pack, but in me. Because for the first time, I couldn't disappear. Not when the Alpha King was still watching. I thought I imagined it when he moved. A trick of the firelight, perhaps, or my weary mind weaving dreams where none should exist. But no, this was Ray. The Alpha King crossed the hall like a storm descending. Every step carried the weight of command. Every shift of his cloak whispered of danger and power. The crowd noticed instantly. Conversations faltered, laughter stuttered, music wavered. One by one they parted, bodies instinctively stepping aside, as though the air itself urged them to clear his path. His presence demanded it, unyielding, unstoppable, inevitable. My breath caught in my throat as the storm drew closer. I wanted to run, to fade into the shadows, but my feet were rooted to the ground. The hall stretched long and endless, yet he closed the distance in mere heartbeats. And then he stood before me. The world shrank to that single moment. The fire crackled somewhere in the distance. The murmurs of the pack pressed in like a tide, but none of it mattered. Only him, Kael Stormcrest, the Alpha King. You! His voice wrapped around me, low and dark, like thunder softened by silk. A shiver rolled through me, sharp and unbidden. The word was simple, yet heavy, as though it carried centuries of meaning. I froze, my lips parted, my tongue stumbled over itself. Me? The corner of his mouth didn't lift, but his storm-grey eyes never wavered. They held me captive, unblinking, unraveling every fragile wall I had built to survive. Be ready. 2 words. No more, no less. But they struck like lightning, searing themselves into me. Before I could ask what he meant, before I could breathe another question, he was gone. Turning, moving with the same certainty, vanishing into the crowd as swiftly as he had come. The air rushed back into my lungs, but it felt thin, fragile, useless. I was left trembling, my body a vessel of chaos, my heart a wild drum that refused to settle. 1,000 questions clawed inside my chest. What did he mean? Ready for what? Why me? My hands shook as I pressed them again, except my dress, as if I could steady myself, as if fabric could anchor me when the ground itself felt unsteady. The whispers of the crowd swelled again, buzzing at the edges of my hearing. Did you see? He spoke to her. Why her? Their voices pierced, but they didn't root me in shame this time. They only deepened the confusion twisting inside me. I could still feel the echo of his words in my bones. Be ready. For what storm had he set in motion? The hall pulsed with music once more, the feast resuming, laughter rising to cover the fracture of silence his presence had left behind. But I couldn't join them. I stood still, caught in the wake of something far greater than I could comprehend. My chest rose and fell too quickly, every breath jagged. I pressed a hand to my heart, trying to calm the racing within. It was useless. Nothing could quiet the storm he left behind. Around me, life carried on. Celine's laughter, shrill and victorious, cut through the air as she basked in the attention of those desperate to please her. The elders raised their cups, their voices booming with hollow blessings. Magas twirled in hopeful dances, their eyes gleaming with dreams of being chosen. But none of it touched me. I was elsewhere. I was still in the space between his gaze and mine, still drowning in the weight of a voice that had torn through my shadows with 2 simple words. Be ready. I whispered them to myself, tasting the strangeness of them, as though repeating them might unlock their meaning. But the more I said them, the more they unsettled me. Ready for humiliation, ready for rejection, ready for an end I could not yet see. I didn't know. And that uncertainty gnawed at me more fiercely than Celine's cruelty, more sharply than the whispers of the pack. I felt watched, even after he had gone. The echo of his storm lingered, pressing against my skin, thrumming in the air, stirring the marrow of my bones. I wrapped my arms around myself as though I could keep it contained, as though I could keep myself from shattering. My lips were dry, my throat tight, my maw in a tempest of questions with no answers. Why me? Why now? What did he see when he looked at me? The firelight flickered across the hall, but its warmth couldn't touch me. Cold seeped into my veins, not from the winter outside, but from within, a chill left in the wake of the Alpha King's presence. And yet, beneath that chill, a spark smouldered. I hated it. I feared it. But I couldn't deny it. Hope. Fragile. Dangerous. A fragile hope that his words meant something more than chance, more than cruelty, more than a fleeting mistake. The night blurred on, filled with noise and colour and movement, but I was caught in stillness, in the shadow of his gaze, in the echo of his voice. Be ready. And as the music rose again, as lantern lights swayed above, I knew one truth above all others. Nothing about this night would ever be the same again. Nothing about this night would ever be the same again. That truth clung to me like frost on skin, refusing to melt, even as the hall erupted with life again. Music soared, laughter returned, and yet I was locked in silence, trembling with the weight of 2 words I could not forget. I slipped away before the crowd could notice. My body moved on instinct, searching for shadows, craving the comfort of walls instead of eyes. The corridors of the keep stretched long and dim, lanterns flickering with soft flames that painted the stone in restless light. My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat a reminder of his voice. Be ready. Ready for what? The question gnawed at me, louder than the festival still echoing behind me. My steps quickened, dress whispering against the cold stone floor, breath misting faintly in the chill of the night that crept through narrow windows. I thought I had escaped the weight of his presence. I was wrong. Because when I reached the old courtyard, silent and forgotten, he was already there, yelled Stormcray. It's the Alpha King, the storm that haunted every whispered tale. He leaned against a frost-bitten column, his broad shoulders haloed by moonlight. The night wrapped around him like it belonged to him, like the air itself, bowed in reverence. My feet faltered. My throat closed. He had followed me, or perhaps he had known I would come here. You left, he said, voice steady, calm, as though speaking the simplest of truths. I swallowed hard. I didn't think anyone would notice. His gaze flicked toward me, storm grey and unyielding. I noticed. The words landed heavy, dragging the breath from my chest. I had lived my entire life unseen, invisible, and now his eyes, his voice, his presence saw me too clearly. I took a hesitant step closer, then froze, unsure if I was trespassing on ground meant only for kings. But he didn't turn me away. He waited. The silence stretched between us, filled only by the soft hiss of the wind and the distant murmur of the feast. My hands twisted in front of me, restless, desperate to anchor themselves to something. Finally I whispered, "Why me?" His head tilted, shadows carving his face into something both terrible and beautiful. "Why not you?" My lips parted, but no words came. He said it like a challenge, like a truth I couldn't deny, though my heart fought against it. "You see weakness," I whispered, forcing the words past my throat. "Everyone does. I am the shadow they mock, the mistake they pity. I am nothing." For the first time, his expression shifted, tightening, hardening, as if my words struck him with a force I didn't understand. "You are not nothing," he said, the weight of a growl curling at the edges of his voice. "And I do not see weakness." The conviction in his tone unravelled something inside me, something raw and dangerous. My chest ached, my eyes burned, and before I could stop myself, I lifted my hand, slowly, hesitantly, to the scar along my wrist. A mark I had never shown anyone. A reminder of a night I barely survived. His gaze dropped to it, and for the first time, his composure cracked. His hair, and large and steady, lifted halfway, as if he would touch me, but then he stopped, his fingers curling against his palm. "What happened?" he asked, voice low, almost reverent. The air thickened between us. Memories pressed in like knives, sharp and merciless. I shook my head, pulling my hand back, shame searing through me. "It doesn't matter." "It does," he said firmly, "because it is part of you, and nothing about you is meaningless." Tears pricked my eyes, hot and unwelcome. No one had ever spoken to me like that, not with certainty, not with reverence. I looked away, desperate to hide the storm raging in my chest. "Why are you doing this? Why speak to me at all?" He stepped forward then, closing the space between us, and the air shifted. The scent of frost and pine clung to him, sharp and clean, and it wrapped around me until I could hardly breathe. "Because I know what it is to carry scars that no one else can see," he said quietly, "and because when I looked at you tonight, I did not see an Omega lost in shadows. I saw fire buried beneath frost." His words struck deeper than any cruelty I had endured, deeper than the scars themselves. I trembled, caught between disbelief and the terrifying flicker of hope. Before I could answer, a sharp voice pierced the night. "Your Majesty." We both turned. A guard stood at the entrance of the courtyard, bowing low, though his eyes flicked toward me with poorly hidden disdain. Cale's jaw tightened. "What is it?" "The elders request your presence." For a moment, silence reigned. His gaze returned to me, lingering, unreadable, heavy with something I couldn't name. Then he nodded once, curtly, and turned toward the guard. But just before he left, his eyes found mine again. I meant what I said. And then he was gone. The courtyard felt colder without him, the moonlight harsher, the silence louder. I wrapped my arms around myself, my heart pounding against my ribs like it wanted to escape. "Be ready," he had said. And now, this, his voice, his gaze, his words that refused to let me vanish. I pressed my fingers against the scar at my wrist, my chest aching with questions and the faintest spark of something I didn't dare name. Hope. Dangerous, fragile hope. But it burned all the same. And I knew, no matter how I tried, there would be no turning back. The rumours spread like wildfire, devouring every corner of the keep before the first light touched the horizon. I heard them in hushed whispers as I passed, felt them in the weight of every stare, tasted them in the bitterness of every breath. They twisted truth into venom, weaving stories I had never spoken, painting me as desperate, pathetic, clawing for a crown I had no right to dream of. By dawn, I was no longer simply Elara, the forgotten Omega. I was the liar. The girl who thought herself worthy of catching the Alpha King's eye. The elders summoned me to the hall. Their robes swept the floor, their eyes like shards of ice. They didn't need to raise their voices. Their verdict was already written in the lines of their mouths. "Unworthy," they declared. The word echoed through the chamber, louder than any howl. My chest tightened, my vision blurred, but I stood still, silent, because I had no defense that would matter to them. "Banished from the hall," they continued, their voices like gavel strikes. "You will not taint the ceremony with your delusions." Gasps rippled through those gathered. Some smirked, some looked away, none stepped forward. And Cale, he was gone. The seat that had held his power, his storm-grey presence, stood empty. No defence came, no voice cut through the silence to shield me. It was as though he had never looked at me at all. The ground felt unsteady beneath my feet as I stumbled from the hall, the cold air outside striking my face like a cruel slap. I pressed a hand to my chest, but it did nothing to quiet the storm raging inside me. Alone. I was alone again, so a fragile hope he had lit inside me flickered weakly, smothered by the winds of ridicule and betrayal. I told myself I had been a fool to believe otherwise, a fool to think an Alpha King could ever see worth in someone like me. The corridors blurred as I walked, faces twisting with judgment, whispers slicing at my heels. Every step was heavier than the last, as though the stone itself sought to drag me down. I reached the outer courtyard, empty and still beneath the fading night. My breath spilled into the air in ragged clouds, my fingers trembling as I clutched the worn edge of my cloak tighter. The memory of his voice haunted me. "You are not nothing." But where was he now? If his words had been true, would he not have stood against them? Would he not have spoken, silenced the elders, shattered the lies that burned me alive? Instead, I had been left to ashes. I sank to the cold steps, burying my face in my hands, the weight of despair pressing me smaller and smaller until I was nothing more than the shadow they claimed I was. I thought of my scar, the mark I had revealed in a moment of trembling courage, how he had looked at it, at me, with something I dared call reverence. And now? It felt like a cruel dream, a trick of the night meant only to unravel me. My chest ached, each beat of my heart like a blade. I wanted to scream, to rage, but the sound would not leave me. Only silence came, broken by shallow, shaky breaths. Hours passed, though it felt like a lifetime. The sky bled with the pale light of morning, brushing frost across the stones. The ceremony music still drifted faintly from the great hall, muffled by distance, a cruel reminder that life continued without me. Tears stung, but I let none fall. I would not give them that. I had given enough already, my hope, my pride, my fragile belief in something more. Perhaps this was what I was always meant to be. Forgotten. Cast aside. A story no one remembered. Still, the storm inside me refused to die. Despair raged, yes, but beneath it, deeper, buried like embers under snow, something else stirred. Hurt sharpened into anger, betrayal sparked into defiance. I rose slowly, my knees stiff, my breath unsteady, but my spine straighter than it had been in years. My hands curled into fists at my sides. If the elders believed they had broken me, they were wrong. They had pushed me into shadows, but shadows could still move. Shadows could still rise. I turned away from the hall, away from the music and the laughter that had once tempted me. My steps carried me toward the edge of the keep, toward silence, toward the only place left for me. The night was colder there, the air sharper, biting at my skin. The forest loomed beyond the walls, dark and endless, whispering promises I could not yet understand. My heart was a storm of despair, yes, but storms could change. And though my hope was fragile, battered, nearly extinguished, some part of me clung to the memory of his gaze. The way he had looked at me, not as shadow, not as nothing, but as something more. I pressed a trembling hand against my chest, eyes closing. If he would not stand for me now, then I would stand for myself. Even if it meant walking into the unknown, even if it meant never coming back. The snow crunched beneath my unsteady steps, each one heavier than the last. The night was silent, but for the whisper of wind weaving through the pines, cold air biting my cheeks, the frost clinging to my lashes. I wrapped my cloak tighter, though it did nothing to warm me, nothing to mend the pieces of myself that felt splintered beyond repair. And then a roar split the air. The sound tore through the silence like thunder, cracking open the sky, shaking the earth beneath me, rattling the bones in my chest. My breath caught, my knees weakened. That voice, I knew it. Kale. He came like a tempest, like the storm every tale had promised him to be, snow swirling as though answering his call. His presence filled a clearing in a single heartbeat, vast and unstoppable, a force that silenced every cruel whisper, every shadow of doubt. The elders, the guards, the onlookers, anyone who had followed to witness my disgrace, fell into silence, their sneers swallowed by the sheer weight of him. "She is mine." His words rolled across the night, deep and absolute, shaking through the ground and up into my very soul. The snow itself seemed to still at his voice, the air pausing to listen. And then his arms circled me, fierce and unyielding, pulling me into the shelter of his strength. His dominance wrapped around me like a shield, fire and frost twined together, daring anyone to come closer. Elara Frostweaver is my mate, my queen. The declaration struck harder than the roar, harder than any verdict the elders had thrown against me. It shattered every cruel word, every mocking laugh, every doubt carved into my bones. Gasps rippled through the crowd, sharp and disbelieving. Some cried out, others stumbled back, but no one dared raise their voice in protest. No one dared defy him. I looked up at him, vision blurred by tears I couldn't hold back. His storm-grey eyes locked on me with a force that unravelled every defence I had built, every wall I had ever hidden behind. And in that gaze I saw no doubt, no hesitation, only truth. For the first time in my life, I believed it. I wasn't forgotten. I wasn't invisible. I was chosen. My body trembled, but it wasn't from the cold anymore. It was from the fire of his claim, the impossible warmth of his presence. The storm within me stilled, not silenced, but tamed by the certainty in his voice. The elders shifted uneasily, their power faltering beneath his. One tried to speak, words fumbling in the air, but Kael's growl silenced them before they could form. His authority crashed over them like an avalanche, undeniable and final. Shibel. Ongs to no whispers, no lies, no shadows, he thundered. She belongs here, at my side, as the moon belongs to the night sky. My knees nearly buckled, but his arm held me firm, anchoring me, lifting me higher than I had ever dared to stand. The crowd lowered their eyes, one by one, bowing not only to him but to me, to us. The power in the air shifted, heavy and undeniable, and for a heartbeat I felt it. The bond, fragile yet blazing, threading between us like a spark of lightning waiting to ignite. I pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the steady thunder of his heart beneath my palm. It matched the storm of my own, two rhythms colliding, merging, becoming something more. I thought... My voice cracked, barely a whisper. I thought you were gone. His gaze softened, though his hold on me never did. I was never gone. I was watching, waiting, for the moment they revealed their true faces, and for the moment you would see your own. The words broke me open. All the loneliness, the fear, the years of being unseen spilled out in hot tears against the cold night. But instead of shame, I felt release. Kael's hand rose, cupping my cheek, his thumb brushing away the wetness. His touch burned and soothed all at once, steady and sure, a vow more binding than words. No one will ever cast you aside again, he said, not while I draw breath. I leaned into him, the chill of the snow forgotten beneath the fierce warmth of his promise. Around us, the world watched, but in that moment, there was only him, his breath mingling with mine, his presence wrapping around me like the storm he commanded. The night no longer felt cold, the shadows no longer felt suffocating. I had been forgotten, but now I was chosen. Chosen not because I begged, not because I pleaded, but because he saw me, truly saw me, when no one else ever did. And with his words, his arm, his claim, he gave me the courage to see myself too. My tears fell freely now, not from despair, but from the overwhelming weight of being found. His forehead rested gently against mine, the space between us vanishing. Oh, his breath steady and sure. You are mine, he whispered, softer this time, not as a king, but as a man. And I am yours. And I believed him. For the first time, I believed. The night had gone still, as though even the snow itself, bowed to the truth spoken between us. Kael's hand lingered against my cheek, steady, grounding, a vow etched into the very air. The crowd had melted back into silence, their whispers swallowed by the weight of his claim. But I barely noticed them anymore. My world had narrowed to the storm grey of his eyes and the warmth of his breath mingling with mine. He did not let go of me. Not even when the elders shifted uneasily, their pride wounded, their authority cracked. He stood unyielding, his arm firm around me, daring them to challenge what had already been written in the bond between us. And for the first time, I didn't shrink under their gaze. I stood tall, anchored by him, yes, but also by myself, by the piece of me that had finally, after years of being forgotten, learned to believe. Kael tilted his head slightly, his lips brushing close to my ear, his voice low, meant only for me. "You are safe now." The words pierced deeper than any threat ever had. Safe, the one thing I had never truly been. I closed my eyes, letting the sound of it wash over me, steadying my breath, my heart, my soul. When I opened them again, the night seemed different. The lanterns that lined the path flickered like tiny stars, the frost on the stones glimmered with quiet beauty, and the world, once suffocating, now felt wide with possibility. Still, the weight of what had happened pressed heavy against my chest. The rumours, the banishment, the cruel eyes of those who wished me gone. They had not vanished simply because Kael had claimed me. They lingered in the shadows, waiting. But his hand in mine told me I was no longer alone to face them. He turned, it guiding me gently but firmly away from the hall, away from the stairs and the whispers. Each step we took together felt like a declaration of its own, an unspoken vow that no storm, no curse, no decree could unmake. The snow crunched beneath our feet, the silence between us rich and heavy, yet strangely comforting. Finally, I spoke, my voice softer than I intended. "Do you regret it?" His gaze snapped to mine, sharp and unwavering. "Never." The certainty in his tone struck through me, melting the last traces of doubt that clung to my ribs. "You will face opposition," I whispered, though the words trembled, half warning, half fear. "I have faced wars," he said simply. "But this is not something I will ever yield." My chest tightened. I wanted to believe that nothing, no curse, no enemy, no shadow could sever this bond. And yet, the unease that had always followed me whispered still, reminding me that peace was fragile, that happiness could be stolen as easily as breath. But when Kael stopped, turning to face me fully beneath the watchful moon, his hands closing over mine, all I could see was him. His voice dropped, gentler now. "Elara, I meant every word. You are my mate, my queen. But more than that, you are the one who woke something in me I thought long dead." I swallowed hard, my throat aching, the sting of tears threatening again. "And what is that?" His smile was faint, almost wistful. "Hope." The word wrapped around me like a cloak, warm and fierce, banishing the last of the night's cruelty. Hope. It was fragile, yes, but it was also alive. We walked on, leaving the hall and its ghosts behind, the path opening before us, winding toward the forest edge where the frost-laced trees stood like sentinels. Their branches whispered secrets in the wind, as if they too bore witness to this new bond. He stopped again, pulling me closer, his forehead pressing against mine, the world falling away until only our breaths filled the silence. "I will not promise the road ahead will be easy," he murmured, "but I promise it will be ours." closed my eyes, letting the words sink into me, branding themselves deeper than any scar. Hours. For the first time, I felt the word was real. The forest creaked in the distance, a sound both ancient and warning. I shivered, though not entirely from the cold. Something in the air shifted, subtle, uneasy, like the faint crack before a storm. Kael seemed to sense it too. His hold on me tightened, protective, his gaze sweeping the trees with sharp caution. But then he looked back at me, softer again, grounding me in the warmth of his presence. The storm would come, I knew it in my bones. But tonight, I wasn't running from it. Tonight, I stood within it, chosen, claimed, no longer forgotten. Kael's lips brushed the top of my head, his voice a vow whispered against the night. Let them come. And as the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in fragile silence, I believed him, because this was only the beginning.